A former Hell's Angel walks into a small-town diner and does the unthinkable. He buys an 18-year-old girl, not to own her, but to set her free from the man threatening to sell her. But when he brings her home and she steps out of the shadows, he freezes. Because what he sees isn't just pain, it's a lifetime of scars carved into her skin. He thought he was saving her life. But soon, the town turns against him, calling him a monster. And the girl he rescued? She carries a secret that could destroy them both if it ever comes out. Now, one broken man and one broken girl are trapped in a storm of lies, judgment, and redemption, fighting to prove that goodness can still come from the darkest places. But when the truth finally surfaces, will saving her cost him his freedom or save his soul forever? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It fell in steady sheets across the Montana plains, turning the dirt roads into rivers of brown mud. Tanner Briggs leaned against the doorway of his small auto shop, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that had long since given up being clean. The sign above him, Briggs Auto and Repair, swayed in the wind, its paint chipped and peeling. He'd meant to fix it for months now, but like most things in his life, he just hadn't found the will. He used to move fast, used to wake up with a roar in his chest and a bike under him, chasing the wind down highways that stretched forever. But that was another lifetime, one filled with road dust, bar fights, and the roar of Hell's Angels riding shoulder to shoulder. Now, his days were quiet. Too quiet sometimes, the kind of quiet that left him alone with his thoughts. That evening, the rain came harder, drumming against the shop roof. Tanner sighed, shutting the lights off and locking the door. He lived 5 miles down the road, out near the hills, but his stomach grumbled loud enough to change his plans. There was a diner a mile away, Millie's place, open late and always smelling of coffee and fried chicken. He figured a hot meal would do more good than another lonely night at home. Inside the diner, the warmth hit him first. The smell of bacon grease, old coffee, and wet boots filled the air. A few regulars sat in booths, talking low. The waitress, Millie herself, nodded when she saw him and pointed to his usual corner table. "Evening, Tanner. You want the usual?" she called. He gave a half smile. "Yeah, and a refill on the coffee if you got it strong." "Always do," she said, chuckling. Tanner slid into his seat, back to the wall, a habit that had never left him. The rain beat against the window beside him, and he let the sound fill the silence. He didn't notice the girl right away. She sat 2 booths down, head bowed, her brown hair wet and stringy. Her coat looked sizes too big. Across from her sat a red-faced man with a beer gut, his voice low and angry. Tanner tried not to listen. Not his business, he told himself. But when the man's voice rose, the words cut through the clatter of dishes. "You think I'm joking, girl? You either do what I say, or you're out on your ear. You owe me." The girl flinched. "Please," she whispered, her voice thin as tissue. "I'll find work. He slammed his hand on the table. "Ain't no work for trash like you, but I can get my money's worth another way." Tanner's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. He felt that old heat rising in his chest, the one he'd sworn to bury years ago. He stared into the cup, breathing slow. "Don't," he told himself. "Stay out of it." But then the man said, loud enough for half the diner to hear, "Somebody'll pay for you, don't you worry." That did it. Tanner stood, his chair scraping the floor. Every head turned as he walked over. The man looked up, sneering. "What do you want, biker?" Tanner didn't blink. How much? The room went dead quiet. The man blinked, caught off guard. What did you say? You said somebody'll pay, Tanner said, voice steady. So I'm paying. How much? Millie gasped from behind the counter. The girl looked up for the first time, eyes wide and wet with fear. She couldn't have been more than 28, though the hollow look in her eyes made her seem older. The man smirked. 500. Tanner pulled his worn wallet from his back pocket. He counted out $500 in 20s, money he'd been saving for a new roof, and laid it on the table. There. She's free. You leave her be. The man's jaw dropped, but greed won over shock. He snatched the bills, grinned, and stood. Your problem now, biker. When he was gone, the diner stayed silent. The girl stared at Tanner like she couldn't decide if he was a savior or a threat. Tanner looked at her gently. Come on, let's get you out of here. She hesitated. Why'd you do that? He shrugged. Because somebody had to. Outside, the rain hit harder, but Tanner didn't mind. He opened the passenger door of his old pickup, holding it for her. She looked at him, then at the dark street beyond the diner, and finally climbed in. They drove in silence for a while, the windshield wipers squeaking. Her hands trembled in her lap. Tanner glanced over. You got a name? She hesitated, then said quietly, Lila. All right, Lila, I'm Tanner. You hungry? She shook her head. I just want to go home. Where's that? She looked out the window. Don't have one. The road stretched ahead, slick and shining under the headlights. Tanner's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Then you can stay at my place tonight, just till you figure out what's next. Lila's voice broke. You're not gonna... No, he said, quickly. You're safe, all right? You're free now. When they reached his farmhouse, the porch light flickered against the dark. The house was old but solid, sitting quiet under the storm. Tanner handed her a blanket from the truck. There's a couch inside. I'll take the barn. She frowned. You don't have to. I do, he said gently. You need rest. Inside, the house smelled faintly of wood smoke and motor oil. Lila stood in the living room, small and unsure, as Tanner set down a mug of tea for her. She didn't drink it, just stared into the steam. Good night, Lila, Tanner said, pulling on his coat again. She turned as he opened the door. Why'd you really do it? He paused. Rain hissed outside. Because I know what it's like to owe somebody your soul, he said softly. Then he stepped out into the storm, leaving her standing there, the blanket clutched to her chest. In the barn, Tanner sat on a bale of hay, listening to the thunder roll. He felt the ache in his chest, the kind that came from seeing someone broken in the same places you once were. He prayed quietly, something he hadn't done in years. Back in the house, Lila lay awake on the couch, the blanket pulled to her chin. For the first time in a long while, no footsteps followed her, no doors slammed, no threats hissed in the dark. Outside, the rain eased to a whisper, and though neither of them knew it yet, this storm was only the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. Morning came slow and gray over the hills. The rain was light now, a soft mist over the fields. Tanner woke in the barn with straw in his hair and a knot in his back. He stretched, listened to the quiet, and felt that small weight in his chest again. The kind that meant a stranger slept on his couch, scared and alone. He stood, brushed off his jeans, and headed for the house. The farmhouse smelled of cold ash and damp wood. Lila lay curled on the couch, blanket up to her chin. Her eyes were open. They were the kind of eyes that had learned to watch doors and windows, like she expected trouble to walk in at any minute. When she saw Tanner, she sat up fast and clutched the blanket tighter. "Morning," he said, keeping his voice low. "You warm enough?" She nodded but did not speak. Her hair hung in knots. She looked small in the big room. "I'll make breakfast," he said. "You can come to the table if you want, or not. Your choice." He moved slow on purpose. He set a kettle on the stove. He cracked eggs into a pan, added salt, then slid bread into the toaster. The old radio on the counter muttered a soft country song. The kitchen filled with the smell of butter and coffee. When the toast popped, Lila flinched so hard the blanket slipped from her shoulders. Tanner pretended not to notice and reached for plates. She stood at the edge of the room like a stray cat, half ready to bolt, half hoping for a hand to stroke its back. Heiss placed 2 plates on the table, then stepped away and poured coffee. "Eat," he said, and sat with his own plate. He kept his eyes on his eggs. He didn't push. After a long half-minute, he heard the soft scrape of the chair. She sat across from him. She picked up the fork slow, like it might bite. 1 bite, then another. Her hands shook a little, but she ate. Halfway through, she looked up. "You slept in the barn," she said. He nodded. "I did." "Why?" He chewed and swallowed. "Seemed right. You're safe in here." She studied him. Her gaze was sharp, like she was looking for cracks. "Are you going to want something later?" "No," he said. She did not believe him. He could see it. But she wanted to. He could see that, too. When the plates were empty, Tanner rinsed them in the sink. Lila stood to help, then froze like she'd overstepped. He handed her a towel. "You can dry if you want," he said. "If not, that's fine." She dried. The small task steadied her breathing. When they were done, he wiped the counter, then leaned against it. "We should talk," he said. Her face closed again, like a door. He kept his tone gentle. "2 things. First, you're free. You leave if you want. You stay if you want. I won't lock a door on you. Second, house rules if you stay a while. The barn is mine. The gun safe is locked and stays that way. If you need money, say so. We'll figure it out. And if you get scared at night, turn on the porch light. It shines into the barn, and I'll know to come." She blinked. "Why would you do that for me?" He stared at the window. The mist moved in layers across the field. "Because somebody should have done it for me once," he said. "Nobody did." She did not ask for details. He did not give them. He fetched a cardboard box from a hall closet. Inside were old t-shirts, soft with age, and a couple of sweatpants that had belonged to his brother. He set the box on a chair and stepped back. "These might fit till we get you something better. Bathroom's down the hall. Towels are clean." She glanced toward the hall, then at him again. "Are you going to stand here?" "I'm going to fix the porch step," he said, nodding toward the front door. "It squeaks and might trip you. I'll be outside." She carried the box down the hall, steps light as a whisper. Tanner went to the porch, took out his tool belt, and knelt to pry up the loose board. He worked slow, listening to the soft thud of drawers and the hiss of the shower starting. He felt the old ache again, and did not look toward the sound. When the shower cut off, the mist had turned to fine rain. He replaced the board, hammered 4 nails in a tidy line, and stood to test the step. Solid now. He wiped moisture from his hair with his sleeve and went back inside. Lila sat on the couch again, wrapped in clean clothes that hung on her frame. Her hair was wet and combed back. She looked younger, and somehow more breakable. "I can sweep or something," she said. "I don't want to be useless." "You're not," he said. "But if it helps, the broom's in the pantry. I've got parts coming to the shop. I'll be back for lunch. You can heat the stew in the fridge if you want." She frowned. You're leaving me here? I am, he said. Unless you want to come. She looked at the window. The day was dull and dim. I'll stay, she said. For now. He nodded. At the door, he paused. If anyone knocks, don't open it. If you get scared, porch light. She hesitated. What if the man from the diner comes back? Tanner's jaw tightened. He won't, he said. The words were flat and sure. But if he does, he'll talk to me. He drove to the shop with the old truck heater, humming weak warmth at his boots. The town of Clearwater was small and spread out. The main road held a grocery, a feed store, a hardware shop, 2 bars, the diner, and the church with a white steeple. People knew faces here. Most knew Tanner's. They knew pieces of his history, too. Older men nodded with caution when he passed. Younger men stared like he was a story told over beers. He kept his eyes on the day's work. By mid-morning, he had a Ford on the lift and a transmission on the bench. His hands found rhythm. Turn, wipe, check. He worked best when he was quiet. Around noon, Millie stopped by with a paper sack. Brought you sandwiches, she said, setting them on the counter. And I heard about last night. You sure you know what you're doing? No, Tanner said, but I know what I won't do. She studied him a long moment and then nodded. You always were stubborn. She put a small thermos beside the sack. Chicken noodle. For her. You tell her it's on the house. I will, he said. Thanks. He left early that day. The sky hung low and pale. When he pulled into his drive, he saw the porch light off and felt some of the tightness in his chest ease. He carried the sack inside. Lila had cleaned. The floor was swept. The sink was empty. The coffee table was wiped. She stood near the window with her hands tucked into her sleeves. When she saw the bag, her eyes widened. Food? She asked, like it was a surprise. From the diner, he said. Millie sent soup for you. She took the thermos slow, like it might be a trick, then smiled at the first warm sip. The smile was quick, like a shy bird, but real. They ate at the table. Turkey sandwiches, potato chips between bites. It felt almost normal. When the plates were empty, she pushed hers toward him, then pulled it back. I should wash it, she said, standing. Leave it, he told her, and she sat again, confused and relieved at the same time. The afternoon moved soft. Tanner fixed the loose hinge on the back door. Lila folded old towels and stacked them straight. When she finished, she stood in the doorway of the kitchen, looking like she didn't know where to put her hands. You ever drive? He asked. She shook her head. I never learned. He took the keys from a hook and nodded toward the yard. We'll try the truck in the field, just a circle. She blinked. Now? Now's fine. They went outside. The rain had thinned to a mist so light it felt like breath on the skin. The field behind the house was flat, the grass pressed down from the week of storms. He slid into the passenger seat and had her take the wheel. Foot on the brake, he said. Turn the key, gentle. She did, jaw tight. The engine rumbled. She flinched, then steadied. He pointed out the gear shift, the slow release of the brake, the tiny press of the gas. The truck rolled an inch, then stalled. She slapped the wheel with her palm, scared, then laughed at herself, cheeks flushing. He laughed too, a short bark that surprised him. They tried again. The truck lurched forward and made a wobbly circle in the field. By the third lap, she was breathing easier. You're doing fine, he said. Feels like freedom, she said, and bit her lip like she had said too much. He didn't make a big deal of it. He just nodded. We'll practice again tomorrow. They parked and went back inside. He set logs in the wood stove and struck a match. The fire caught slow, flames licking the bark. The room warmed by degrees. Lila held her hands out to the heat and closed her eyes. Through the afternoon, they talked in little bits. What kind of music did she like? Quiet stuff, she said. Did she read? Sometimes, she said. When I could? The answers were thin. Her life had not left a lot of room for hobbies. She asked about the shop, about the customers, about the long rows of wrenches on the pegboard. How do you know which one to use? She asked, honestly curious. By feel, he said, by the sound a bolt makes when it first turns. You learn to listen. She thought about that. I never learned the sound of safe places, she said, so soft he almost missed it. He did not try to fix the sentence. He only said, You're learning now. Evening came early, as it often did in this valley. He cooked a simple dinner, chili from a can with onions and a little shredded cheese. She stirred it for him and tried to hide the pleasure she felt at helping. After they ate, he washed the bowls and set them upside down on the towel. I can do more, she said. You did plenty today, he answered. Then he grabbed an old shoebox from the top of the fridge and set it on the table. Inside were pens and a small blank journal with a faded blue cover. What's that? She asked. Something for you, he said. You don't have to write your story in there. You can write the things you never got to say out loud, or a list of things you want, or a prayer, or nothing. It's yours. She touched the cover with the tips of her fingers. I don't know what to write. That's all right, he said. You'll know when you know. Her hands shook again, but not from fear. Some other feeling moved through her. Hope, maybe. It made her awkward and new. They sat by the fire. The wind ruffled the eaves. The house creaked like an old man stretching his back. Tanner told her about the pastor next door, Reverend Hal, and his wife, Grace. How they sometimes brought him apple butter and argued about whether he was eating enough. Lila listened and smiled. It was a small, ordinary story, but ordinary sounded like heaven to her. Tomorrow, he said, I'll call Hal and ask about someone in town who can help with papers. I don't know how to make it all right, legal-like, but we can start. Fear flickered in her eyes. Papers mean people. People talk. I know, he said. We'll go slow. Only folks we trust. They played cards after that. Go fish. It felt childish and kind. She won twice, grinning shy but proud. He accused her of cheating and she accused him back, and it was the first easy banter they'd shared. When the clock over the stove ticked past 9, he stood. You can take the bedroom tonight, he said. Door has a lock. The key is inside. Window opens easy. If you want me close by, I'll sleep in the chair out here. If you don't, I'll go to the barn. She hugged her arms. The thought of a locked door was sweet and sharp all at once. Could you... She stopped, embarrassed. Could you stay in the chair? Just for tonight? The barn feels... far. Sure, he said, pulling a quilt from the hall closet. Whatever helps. She nodded and went down the hall. The door clicked. He heard the slide of the lock. He didn't mind the sound. It meant she knew she had choices now. He settled into the chair, boots off, quilt over his lap. The fire died to a soft glow. He must have drifted because a noise woke him. A soft cry through the wall, quick and stifled, followed by the hush of the house. He didn't move. He didn't call out. He just sat and listened, and kept still, like a guard who knew the best help sometimes was to be present and silent. In the morning, he thought, he would ask if she wanted him to show her the garden. The wildflowers were not much, but he could turn the soil and let her decide what to plant. The idea made his chest feel less heavy. He dozed again. The rain stopped sometime after midnight, and the air changed. The dark held a clean, wet smell. He dreamed of roads with no end, and then of a porch light that burned steady and bright. At dawn, pale light cut a line under the bedroom door. Tanner woke with a stiff neck and a dry mouth. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and listened. The house was quiet. He stood, folded the quilt, and placed it over the back of the chair. He tapped lightly on the bedroom door. "Coffee," he said. "I'll put it on." He didn't hear a reply, but that was fine. He moved to the kitchen, measured grounds, set the kettle. He cracked the window to let out the night air. A robin hopped along the fence outside, tilting its head to listen to the ground. On the table, the blue journal lay closed, but not where he had left it. It sat neat and centered, as if she had placed it there with care. A pen rested across it, straight as a line. He made oatmeal with a little honey. He set 2 bowls on the table and turned toward the hall to call her. The bathroom door stood open a little. A faint line of steam drifted out. The mirror inside fogged to white. He took a step closer, thinking she had woken early to wash. He stopped himself, turned back to the stove, and stirred the oats again. "Breakfast is ready," he called, gentle. "No rush." There was no answer. He poured coffee into 2 mugs and carried them to the table. A minute later, the bathroom door opened wider. He glanced up out of habit and then looked away just as quick, heat rising in his face. He had seen enough in 1/2 second to make his heart drop to his boots. Pale skin, mapped with old burns and thin raised lines, a web of pain that told a long, cruel story. He set the spoon down very carefully. His hands shook. He stared at the steam rising from the oats. Behind him, her steps paused. He could feel her wanting to vanish into the floor. He could feel the dread on her skin like cold rain. He did not turn around. He spoke to the oatmeal like it was a person. "Coffee's strong today," he said, steady as he could. "And there's honey if you want it." A long breath. Then the soft retreat of bare feet, the bedroom door closing with a click. He gripped the edge of the counter until his knuckles went white. He bowed his head. "Lord," he whispered, the word rough and unused. "Help me help her." He stood there a long moment, letting the prayer settle. When he could breathe again without his voice breaking, he took their bowls to the table and sat. He did not touch his spoon. Outside, the clouds broke a little, and a thin slice of sun slid over the wet grass. The world held still, on the edge of something tender and hard. He waited. That was what the day required. Waiting. Quiet. Care. In the room down the hall, Lila stood with her back pressed to the door, wearing the old t-shirt like armor, shaking from the inside out. The mirror had shown her a body she tried not to see. For a moment she thought she might run, barefoot, into the field, and keep going until the mountains swallowed her up. But the smell of coffee and honey, and the careful sound of a man not turning his head, reached through the panic like a hand. She wiped her face, found her breath, and turned the lock. The day, with all its pain and kindness, began. The day began quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Sunlight drifted across the kitchen table, turning the steam from the coffee into little ribbons of gold. Tanner sat where he always did, the same chipped mug in his hands, waiting. He didn't know what words could reach a girl who carried scars like that, so he didn't try to find them yet. Sometimes silence was the only language worth speaking. A soft sound came from the hallway. Lila stood there, wearing one of his flannel shirts that swallowed her whole. Her hair was damp from another quick shower. She looked pale, tired, but her chin was lifted a little higher than yesterday. She saw him waiting but didn't speak. Tanner only nodded toward the chair across from him. "I made fresh coffee," he said. "Oats are still warm." She hesitated, then sat. Her hands stayed in her lap. He didn't mention what he had seen that morning. He never would. The last thing she needed was pity. He passed her a bowl and the sugar jar. "You want honey with it?" She nodded and poured carefully, avoiding his eyes. When the spoon clinked against the bowl, her hand trembled. "You don't have to talk," Tanner said quietly. "I just figured you might be hungry." For a long while, only the sound of spoons and rain gutters filled the air. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet but steady. "You saw," she whispered. He didn't answer right away. "I did," he said softly. "I'm sorry, Lila." She shook her head. "Don't say sorry. You didn't do it." "No," he said. "But someone should have stopped it." Her throat worked as she swallowed hard. "They didn't. Not once." Tanner leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He wanted to tell her that some people were evil, plain and simple, but words wouldn't fix it. So instead he said, "You want to get out for a bit? Drive into town? Fresh air might help." "I don't want people to see me," she said quickly. "They won't see what you don't show," he said. "You can wear my jacket. It's warm." She thought for a moment, then nodded. "Just for a little while." They rode in the truck with the windows cracked, letting in the smell of pine and wet dirt. The road to Clearwater wound through open fields, dotted with barns and faded billboards. Lila pressed her hand against the glass, tracing the water streaks like a child. "Feels strange," she murmured. "Being in a car and not scared." Tanner glanced at her. "You been scared a long time?" "All my life," she said, barely audible. "I stopped counting the days when it got too hard to tell one from another." He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Well," he said after a moment, "today's a new one. Might as well start counting again." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound easy." "Nothing about it's easy," he said. "But it's worth trying." When they reached town, he parked near the thrift store. "Let's get you a coat that fits," he said. "My sleeves are swallowing your hands." "I can't," she began, but he'd already opened her door. "Tanner, I don't have money." He gave her a small grin. "Lucky for you, I do. And Millie at the diner owes me a favor or two." She sighed, but followed him. Inside, the smell of old fabric and cedar hung thick. Lila's eyes darted around like she expected someone to grab her. A few shoppers looked up, whispering. Tanner ignored them. He found a long gray coat with buttons missing but clean enough. "Try this one," he said. In the small mirror by the rack, she saw her reflection and froze. Her face was thin, her skin pale, but under the coat she looked almost ordinary, like someone who could walk down Main Street without fear. She blinked, touched her cheek, and smiled a little. "That's you," Tanner said quietly. "Not what they made you." When they walked to the counter, the old lady running the store squinted at Lila, then at Tanner. "Didn't think I'd see you bringin' company, Briggs," she said. "Word around is—" Tanner cut her off with a calm smile. "Word around needs better hobbies, Miss Pearl. You take $10 for this?" She pursed her lips, took the money, and said nothing more. Outside, Lila let out a shaky laugh. "You didn't have to defend me." "Yes, I did," he said. "You don't owe explanations to people who don't want the truth anyway." They stopped by the diner next. Millie waved from behind the counter. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Quiet himself," she said with a grin. "And who's your friend?" "This is Lila," Tanner said simply. "She's staying out by my place for a bit." Millie gave Lila a kind smile that softened her whole face. Good to meet you, honey. You want pie? I just pulled apple from the oven. Lila blinked, uncertain. Pie? Warm pie? Millie said, laughing. The real kind. Tanner chuckled. Better take her up on it before she changes her mind. They sat at a corner booth, and when Millie brought 2 slices with ice cream, Lila stared at the plate like it was a painting. I haven't had this since... Her voice trailed off. Since what? Tanner asked gently. Since my mom, she whispered. Before she married him. The bite she took brought tears to her eyes. Tanner pretended not to notice, but he felt something crack inside him. Something heavy and human. When they finished, he left cash on the table. Millie squeezed his arm as they left. You're doing a good thing, Tanner, she said. He shook his head. Just trying not to do the wrong one. The drive home was quiet again, but a softer quiet this time. The clouds had thinned, and the sun painted the hills gold. When they turned into his driveway, Lila suddenly said, You pray, don't you? Tanner blinked. Sometimes, not enough. Do you think God sees people like me? He glanced at her. I think he sees everybody, especially the ones who got hurt the worst. She nodded slowly, looking out the window. Then maybe I'll try talking to him sometime. Tanner smiled faintly. He's a good listener. Back at the farmhouse, Tanner got to work in the garage, changing a carburetor on a Chevy that hadn't run in months. Lila swept the porch, humming under her breath. Every so often, he caught her glancing toward the trees, as if expecting someone to appear. She was still afraid, but she was moving, doing, breathing. That was something. Near sunset, she brought him a glass of water. You've been working all day, she said. Habit, he said, setting the wrench down. Hard to sit still. She studied him. You don't talk about your past. He shrugged. Not much worth telling, just a lot of bad roads and bad choices. You stopped, though, she said softly. That means something. Maybe, he said, but it don't erase what came before. She looked at the oil stains on his hands. You fix things, she said. Even when they're old and broken, that counts. He smiled a little. You sound like Reverend Hal. Who's that? Pastor down the road. Talks too much. Prays more than most. You'll like him. I don't do churches, she murmured. That's all right, he said. He doesn't do judgments. That evening, after supper, Tanner sat on the porch while Lila washed the dishes. The light turned orange and soft. Crickets began to sing in the grass. He closed his eyes, listening to the house creak and settle, the sound of her moving inside. When she joined him, she held 2 mugs of tea. You drink this before bed, she said shyly. Millie told me. He took the cup. You 2 get along already? She's nice, Lila said. She didn't ask questions. That's her gift, Tanner said, smiling. Knows how to let people breathe. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sunset. The quiet between them didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt safe. After a while, she asked, Do you ever think about leaving this town? He shook his head. No need. I already ran enough miles for 3 lifetimes. What made you stop? He looked out across the fields, where the last light faded. My brother died, he said simply. Overdosed. I was supposed to watch out for him. Didn't. I'm sorry, she whispered. He nodded. Me too. But that's when I knew I had to change. You can't outrun the past, but you can make peace with it. She leaned back in her chair. Maybe I'll learn that too. You will, he said. Later, when she went to bed, Tanner sat alone on the porch, listening to the frogs in the pond. The stars were faint behind the clouds, but he didn't mind. He thought about how she'd looked at herself in that thrift store mirror. Half afraid, half amazed. He thought about the scars he'd seen, and the strength it took for her to still smile at pie and sunlight. He whispered another prayer, soft and unsure. Help her find her way. Help me not mess it up. Inside, the house glowed with the warmth of a home that hadn't felt alive in years. And for the first time since he'd quit the road, Tanner Briggs felt like maybe, just maybe, he was finally headed somewhere worth going. By the third week, Clearwater had noticed. Small towns always did. It started with a few glances at the grocery store when Tanner stopped by for bread and coffee filters. Then it spread. Whispers near the church steps. Sideways looks at the diner. Everyone had seen the quiet biker driving through town with a thin girl in his passenger seat, her coat sleeves too long and her face too pale. Millie heard it first at the counter. "That old Hell's Angel's got himself company," one man murmured, not even lowering his voice. "Picked her up from somewhere, they say." Millie frowned. "He picked her up from a nightmare," she muttered, though no one seemed to hear her. At the farmhouse, Lila swept the porch while the morning fog lifted. The air was crisp and smelled of pine and old rain. Tanner was underneath a pickup in the drive, boots sticking out, radio playing a soft country tune. He hummed under his breath, a rare sound that made her smile. She liked mornings now. They still hurt, but not the same way. Each sunrise felt like a promise she could almost believe in. When he rolled out from under the truck, grease smeared on his cheek, she handed him a rag. "You're humming again," she said softly. He grinned. "Guess I forgot how." The phone rang inside, sharp and sudden. Tanner wiped his hands and went to answer it. Lila stood by the porch rail, half listening, trying not to eavesdrop. His voice was low and calm, but his shoulders tensed. When he hung up, he stood still for a moment before turning to her. "That was Deputy Crow," he said. "He's coming by this afternoon." Her face drained of color. "Why?" "Just to talk," he said, though his tone said otherwise. "They want to check you're all right. Routine," he said. Her hands twisted together. "He'll make me go back." "No," Tanner said firmly. "He won't." She nodded, but her breath came quick, shallow. He stepped closer, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You trust me?" She hesitated, then nodded again. "I'm trying." "That's all I need," he said. "We'll face it together." By noon, the sun burned through the haze, and the deputy's cruiser rolled up the dirt drive. The man who stepped out was tall, mid-30s, with a square jaw and a look that said he'd seen too much and believed too little. "Briggs," Crow said, tipping his hat, but not smiling. "Mind if I come in?" "Door's open," Tanner replied. Crow's eyes flicked toward Lila, who stood in the doorway. "Miss," he said, polite but distant. "You doing all right here?" She swallowed. "Yes, sir." "Can I ask how you came to be here?" Tanner stepped in slightly, his voice even. "She was in trouble. I helped. That's the story." Crow studied him. "You can't just bring folks home, Tanner. There's process, there's paperwork." "Process didn't save her," Tanner said. Crow sighed. "I'm not saying you did wrong, just people talk. You've got a record, Briggs. They see you with a young woman, scared, alone. They think the worst." Lila flinched. Tanner's eyes hardened. "People need better imaginations." Crow's tone softened slightly. "You want to help her? Fine. But make it official. Let social services know. Otherwise, it could get messy." Tanner nodded once. "Understood." When Crow left, the tension hung heavy. Lila sat at the table, head in her hands. "It's happening again," she whispered. "They'll take me." "Not while I've got breath," Tanner said quietly. "We'll make it right. Hal knows people who can help. We'll talk to him." That evening, Reverend Hal came by. His old blue truck coughed to a stop, and his wife Grace stepped out carrying a basket of muffins. "Smells like you've been working hard," she said, smiling as she handed the basket to Lila. "I brought enough to last a week, though with Tanner here, maybe half." Lila smiled shyly. Grace's warmth filled the room like sunlight through a window. Hal leaned against the counter, his eyes sharp but kind. "Heard Crow stopped by. Stirring up dust, was he?" Tanner nodded. "He's doing his job. I can't fault him for that." Hal nodded. "Still, the law's slow on Mercy sometimes. We'll help get her papers in order. She's safe here as long as you both want it that way." Lila looked at the pastor uncertainly. "You believe him?" Hal's smile deepened. "Believe in him? I've seen the man rebuild a carburetor blindfolded and give half his pay to a vet he barely knew. I think he's earned belief." Grace touched Lila's arm gently. "You don't have to fear everyone, sweetheart. There are good people still." Tears welled in Lila's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I want to believe that." "You will," Grace said. "Belief starts small, like seeds." Hal chuckled. "Grace can't say 5 sentences without a garden metaphor." Lila laughed softly, surprising even herself. After the McKinleys left, Tanner and Lila sat on the porch again, the air cooling fast. A dog barked somewhere down the valley. "You did good today," Tanner said. "I didn't say much," she replied. "You didn't run," he said. "That's enough." She thought about that, then smiled. "You talk like a preacher sometimes." He snorted. "Hal's rubbing off on me, I guess." The stars came out, faint at first, then brighter. Lila hugged her knees. "What if they don't stop talking? What if the town always thinks I'm something I'm not?" Tanner stared at the sky. "Then we keep living anyway. Let 'em talk till they get tired. Truth's a slow wind, but it wears down the lies." She nodded, quiet for a long time. "I want to learn to be brave again," she whispered. "You already are," he said. "You just don't know it yet." The next morning, the air smelled of rain again. Tanner went to open the shop early, leaving Lila with Grace for a few hours. She helped bake bread, her laughter echoing softly through the kitchen as Grace told old stories. For the first time in years, Lila's hands moved without trembling. But at the diner that afternoon, the whispers grew louder. Tanner could feel them before he sat down. Half-heard sentences, eyes flicking his way. "Biker's up to something again," someone said. "Girl's got trouble written all over her." "Wouldn't surprise me if the sheriff comes next." Tanner finished his coffee and left without a word. That night, rain came again, tapping against the windows. Lila sat by the fire, writing in the little blue journal he'd given her. Tanner watched her quietly. "You've been writing a lot lately," he said. "It helps," she said. "Feels like putting pieces back in order." He smiled. "That's what fixing engines feels like." She looked up. "You really think broken things can work again?" "Not just think," he said. "I've seen it." Later, after she went to bed, Tanner sat on the porch with his old Bible open on his lap. The words blurred in the lamplight, but one line stood clear. "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." He closed the book and stared into the dark. Out on the road, 2 headlights slowed near his driveway before moving on. Whispers had a way of becoming storms in small towns. Tanner felt it coming, the kind that didn't come from the sky. And inside, Lila dreamed of fire, smoke, and a voice telling her she'd never be free. But even in the dream, she heard another voice, quieter and stronger. "You are safe now." And for once, she believed it might be true. The storm broke before dawn. Rain slammed against the windows, thunder rolling through the valley like cannon fire. Tanner woke to the sound and went straight to the kitchen. He moved with quiet purpose. Coffee, wood in the stove, boots by the door. Lila was already awake, sitting at the table with her knees pulled up to her chest, the little blue journal in her hands. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, but her eyes were haunted. "Dreams," she whispered. "They felt real again." "They always do," he said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "But they can't touch you now." Lila wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "You say that like you believe it." "I have to," Tanner said, "or else the past wins." By mid-morning, the storm had passed. Tanner drove into town to open the shop. Lila stayed behind, folding laundry and watching the rain drip off the porch roof. She was starting to get used to the quiet, comfortable even. But quiet didn't last long in Clearwater. The first sign came around noon, a police cruiser pulling into the drive. Lila froze, heart hammering as the engine cut off and Deputy Crow stepped out, raincoat flapping. He called out, "Miss Hayes, you home?" She didn't answer. Her breath came fast. Crow knocked on the door. "Lila, it's Deputy Crow. I just need to ask you a few questions. You're not in trouble." When she still didn't answer, he sighed and took off his hat. "Look, your stepfather came into town this morning. He's filed a complaint. Says you were kidnapped." Her stomach dropped. The room spun. "He's lying," she said, her voice breaking. "I believe you," Crow said quickly. "But there's a process we gotta follow. Can I come in?" Lila shook her head. "Not till Tanner's here." Crow frowned. "Where is he?" "At the shop," she whispered. "Then I'll go talk to him first." When Tanner saw Crow's cruiser pull up outside the garage, his gut tightened. The deputy stepped out, expression grim. "We need to talk," Crow said. Tanner wiped his hands on a rag. "What's wrong?" "Her stepfather's in town. Filed a report. Claims you forced her to leave and took her across county lines. He's pushing for a warrant." Tanner's voice went flat. "That man sold her like a bag of grain. You know it." "I do," Crow said. "But the law's slow to believe what it can't see. If you keep her there without papers, this could turn ugly." "I won't send her back," Crow sighed. "Then we find another way. You need a statement from her. Maybe a church affidavit. The pastor's word still counts for something here." Tanner's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to Hal." "I'll give you till tomorrow," Crow said quietly. "After that, it's out of my hands." By the time Tanner got home, the rain had stopped, but the air was heavy. Lila met him at the door, panic in her eyes. "He came," she said. "He's back." Tanner set his tools down slowly. "Crow told me. You did right not letting him in." "I thought he was going to take me," she whispered. "I still can't breathe right." He guided her to a chair. "You're safe. We'll fix this." Her voice trembled. "You can't fix people like him." "No," Tanner said, "but I can keep him away." That evening, Reverend Hal came by. The old pastor looked serious, his Bible tucked under his arm. Grace followed with a pot of stew. "Tanner," Hal said, "Crow told me what's stirring. You two need a witness. Someone the law respects. I'll testify if it comes to that." Grace nodded firmly, "And she's staying here with us tonight. Safer that way." Lila's eyes widened. "No, I can't hide again." Grace knelt beside her. "You're not hiding, sweetheart. You're standing still long enough to breathe." Tanner glanced at Hal. "You think he'll come here?" Hal's voice was steady. "Men like him don't stop till they're stopped. But you're not alone anymore." Lila stayed with the McKinleys that night. Grace gave her warm soup and a soft blanket, and Hal prayed over her before bed. She fell asleep to the sound of rain tapping the window, clutching the little blue journal against her chest. Back at the farmhouse, Tanner couldn't sleep. Every noise outside made him tense. The wind through the eaves, the creak of the porch, all sounded like footsteps. Around midnight, headlights flashed across the yard. Tanner stood, heart pounding, and reached for the bat by the door. A car slowed near the gate, then stopped. The driver's door opened. Tanner stepped outside into the rain. "Evening, Briggs," a slurred voice called. "Where's my girl?" Tanner recognized the voice instantly. Lila's stepfather. "She ain't yours," Tanner said coldly. "You think you can steal from me?" the man spat. "You don't know who you're messing with." Tanner took a step forward, muscles coiled tight. "Go home, Earl. You come any closer, I'll call the sheriff myself." Earl sneered. "She'll come back when she realizes what kind of man you are. Once a biker, always a—" Tanner moved faster than thought, slamming his fist into the car door just as Earl flinched back. The sound echoed like thunder. "Get off my land," Tanner said, voice low. "Before I forget I changed." Earl backed into his car and peeled away, tires spitting mud. Tanner stood there, chest heaving, rain soaking his shirt. He'd promised himself he'd never raise a fist again. He hadn't. But it had been close. Too close. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire. Folks whispered that the biker had threatened a man. Some said he'd beaten him half to death. Others said he'd locked a woman away in his house. When Tanner drove into town, conversation stopped. Eyes followed him. Even Millie looked worried when he came for coffee. "You know, I don't believe what they're saying," she said quietly, "but people are scared of what they don't understand." He nodded. "Let 'em talk." "You can't fight whispers with silence forever," she warned. "I'm not trying to fight," Tanner said. "I'm trying to live." That night, Lila returned home, exhausted but calmer. She'd helped Grace bake bread and even laughed once at Hal's old jokes. When Tanner saw her smile again, something inside him unclenched. He sat across from her at dinner. "Crow's given us till tomorrow to sort papers," he said. "Hal's writing a statement. We'll be okay." She stared at her bowl. "He won't stop, Tanner. Not till he ruins you." "Then he'll have to try hard," Tanner said. "I've been ruined before. Didn't stick." Her eyes met his, full of gratitude and fear. "Why do you keep helping me?" He smiled faintly. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it. Guess it's my turn." The wind howled that night, rattling the windows, but the porch light stayed on. Tanner sat, near it, listening for footsteps that never came. Inside, Lila slept for the first time in weeks without dreaming of fire. Still, far off in the dark, Earl Hayes sat in his truck, engine idling, eyes full of hate and drink. He wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The morning after the storm was clear and bright, the kind of day that made the air smell new. Tanner woke early, his body sore from tension, and found Lila already sitting on the porch steps with a cup of coffee. Her hair caught the sunlight, and though her eyes were still tired, something inside them had softened. "You didn't sleep much," he said, sitting beside her. "Didn't need to," she answered. "I just watched the light come back." He smiled faintly. That's better than most ways to start a day. For the first time, she smiled back without fear. The next few days found them falling into a rhythm. Lila began cooking simple breakfasts: toast, eggs, oatmeal, and Tanner stopped pretending he didn't enjoy it. After meals, she'd sweep the porch or tend the small garden out back. He'd work at the shop, and when he returned at noon, she'd be waiting with a lunch that tasted better than anything he remembered. Each small task stitched new life into the house. On the third afternoon, he took her to the churchyard where Reverend Hal was patching a fence. "You sure about this?" Tanner asked quietly. Lila nodded. "If people are going to talk, I'd rather give them something true to say." Hal greeted her with a warm grin. "Good to see you, Miss Lila. Tanner tells me you're learning the art of not giving up." "I'm trying," she said. "Still learning what safe feels like." The pastor's eyes softened. "That's all right. Faith's a slow teacher, but a steady one." They spent the rest of the afternoon helping fix the fence, the smell of cut wood mixing with wildflowers. Lila laughed once when Tanner's hammer slipped and hit his thumb, and even Hal joined in. The sound was small, but it felt like sunshine. That evening, back at the farmhouse, Tanner fixed the screen door while Lila watched the sky turn gold. "You ever think about the future?" she asked. "Not much," he said. "Used to be. The future just looked like another mile of road." "And now?" He thought for a moment. "Now it looks like this porch, and maybe some peace that lasts." She looked at him with quiet understanding. "That sounds enough for both of us." As dusk settled, fireflies began blinking near the fence. Lila leaned against the railing, notebook in hand, writing something she didn't read aloud. Tanner sat nearby, letting the silence stretch easy between them. Inside the house, the porch light glowed steady. The town's whispers still rustled like dry grass beyond their little valley. But here, surrounded by the hum of crickets and the smell of cedar, Tanner and Lila had found something rare. An ordinary peace neither of them had ever known. And though neither said it aloud, both felt the same quiet truth. Grace had begun to make its home here. Spring crept into Clearwater like a slow sigh of relief. The snow melted from the hills, leaving damp earth and shy blades of green pushing through. Tanner's fields, long neglected, began to show life again. Lila spent her mornings outside, her hands deep in the soil, planting wildflower seeds she'd bought with money Grace insisted she take. Tanner watched from the porch, coffee in hand, pretending to study the clouds. Truth was, he liked seeing her there, barefoot in the dirt, humming softly to herself like the world might listen. "You'll have half the valley blooming by summer," he teased. She smiled, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Flowers don't ask questions. They just grow where they're planted." He nodded. "That's a sermon right there. Hal would approve." She laughed, and the sound was light, real. Each day fell into a pattern that felt more like family than anything either of them remembered. Tanner worked at the shop while Lila helped Grace at the church kitchen, serving soup to old-timers who called her "Darlin" and asked for seconds. The town began to soften, too. Less whispering, more nods, and even a few smiles. Millie left a pie on their porch one evening without a word. Still, there were moments when shadows crept back. Some nights, Lila woke from dreams that left her gasping. When that happened, she'd light the porch lamp, the signal Tanner had told her to use. He never asked questions, only brewed tea and sat with her until dawn. One evening, as they sat by the garden, she spoke the words she'd held for years. "He used to burn me when I made mistakes, said it was God's way of teaching me obedience." Tanner's hands tightened around his mug. "That wasn't God," he said quietly. "That was evil wearing a preacher's mask." Tears rolled down her face, but her voice didn't shake. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." "You won't be," he said. "You've already beaten him by surviving." She reached out, resting her hand on his arm, a small gesture that said more than words could. Later that week, Reverend Hal invited them to a community dinner at the church. The hall smelled of roasted chicken and warm bread. Lila stood near the doorway, nervous, until Grace looped an arm around her. You belong here, sweetheart. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." By the end of the evening, laughter filled the room, and Lila even danced once with an elderly farmer who called her brave. Tanner watched, pride softening the lines of his face. On the way home, she looked out the truck window at the dark fields. "I think I'm ready to tell my story one day," she said. He smiled. "When you are, I'll be right there beside you." The headlights cut through the mist, and for the first time, the road ahead didn't look dangerous. It looked like hope, planted, deep and ready to grow. The morning started like any other. Sunlight over the fields, the smell of coffee and damp earth. Tanner worked in the shop, grease on his hands, radio humming soft country tunes. Lila was in the yard, trimming the garden beds. Everything felt steady for once, like life had finally found its rhythm. Then she saw the note. It was pinned to the fence post, written in uneven letters. "You took what's mine, you'll pay." Her stomach turned cold. She folded the paper, hands trembling, and went inside to find Tanner. He read it twice, his jaw tightening. "He's back," he muttered. Lila's voice broke. "What does he want?" Tanner looked toward the road. "Control. Same thing he's always wanted." He tore the note in half and threw it in the stove. "He won't get it." But the calm didn't last. That afternoon, a black sedan rolled up to the shop. Earl Hayes stepped out, clean-shaven, wearing a cheap suit that didn't hide the hate in his eyes. Behind him stood a slick man with a camera and a woman holding a notepad. "You're on record," the reporter said. "Mr. Hayes claims this man kidnapped his stepdaughter." Tanner wiped his hands and faced them. "That's a lie." Earl smirked. "You think anyone's going to believe a felon over me? You bought her like property. Everyone knows." Tanner took one step forward. "I bought her freedom." The reporter's camera flashed. "Is that a confession, sir?" Before Tanner could answer, Lila appeared in the doorway, pale but steady. "He saved my life," she said. "That man burned me, beat me, and left me for dead. Tanner Briggs is the only reason I'm still here." Earl sneered. "You're confused, girl. He's got you brainwashed." "Get off my land," Tanner said, his voice low, dangerous. Earl's smirk faltered, but he turned to the camera anyway. "You see? Violent, just like they said." When they drove away, Lila collapsed into a chair, shaking. "They'll twist everything," she whispered. Tanner knelt beside her. "Let them. Truth has a way of climbing out of the mud." But as he stared out the window at the dust rising down the road, he knew the past wasn't done with them yet. It had found them again, and this time, it wasn't leaving quietly. Tanner sat in the jail cell, the concrete cold beneath him. The fight hadn't lasted long, just one punch, one moment of anger when Earl spat Lila's name like poison. Now the whole town believed what it wanted to believe. He stared at his hands, still bruised, and thought of her face when they took him away. She hadn't cried. That hurt more than tears would have. Across town, Lila stayed with Grace and Reverend Hal. The parsonage smelled of lavender and bread, but peace wouldn't come. She kept replaying the scene. Earl's grin, the flash of the camera, the sound of Tanner's voice breaking. "I shouldn't have let him fight for me," she whispered. Grace squeezed her hand. "He didn't fight for you, dear. He fought for what's right." In the quiet of the cell, Tanner whispered a prayer he barely remembered how to say. "Don't let her lose faith in me, Lord." Outside, night fell soft and heavy over Clearwater. Between them, miles of silence stretched like a wound neither knew how to close. But somewhere inside that quiet, hope was still breathing. The courthouse was full, the air thick with whispers and judgment. Tanner sat at the defendant's table, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the floor. Across the room, Lila stood small but steady, her hands clasped around her blue journal like armor. Earl's lawyer spoke first, painting Tanner as a violent man who had bought a girl for himself. The crowd murmured, believing the worst. But when Lila took the stand, the room grew silent. Her voice trembled at first, then gained strength. "He didn't buy me to own me," she said. "He bought me to save me." Slowly she lifted her sleeve, showing the scars that told her story better than words could. "He gave me a home when no one else would." Even the judge's eyes softened. When the verdict came, not guilty, Tanner closed his eyes, breath shaking with relief. Lila ran to him, tears streaming, and the courtroom erupted in quiet applause. For the first time, Tanner didn't feel like an outlaw or a sinner. He felt forgiven, and in that moment, every chain from his past finally broke. Weeks after the trial, Clearwater began to see Tanner differently. The whispers faded, replaced by quiet nods and handshakes. People brought pies, old tools, and small thank yous to the shop. Lila painted a new sign for the garage. "Free to ride." Together they fixed up an old shed beside it, turning it into a safe space for anyone needing a second chance. Runaways, ex-cons, and the lost. Tanner taught them engines and patience. Lila taught them kindness. Every repaired truck, every shared meal, stitched their lives tighter. One evening, as they closed up the shop, Lila smiled. "You gave me a home." Tanner looked at her, eyes warm. "You gave it a heart." The wind carried the scent of oil and wildflowers, and for once, the world around them felt whole again. Summer came gentle that year, spilling golden light over the fields. The wildflowers Lila planted now stretched tall across the yard, their colors bright against the faded boards of the old farmhouse. Tanner stood by the porch, wiping his hands on a rag, watching her hang laundry in the breeze. He still woke early, still fixed engines, still prayed in quiet ways. But something inside him had changed. The ache that once ruled him had eased, replaced by a calm he'd never known. "Truck's ready," he called. "You still up for a drive?" Lila turned, smiling. "You bet I am." They drove into the hills, the old pickup humming steady. The road wound high, giving way to a view of the valley below. Clearwater spread, small and shining beneath them. Tanner pulled over, cut the engine, and let the silence settle. Lila stepped out, her hair catching the wind. "I used to think I'd never feel free again," she said. "You are," Tanner replied. "And so am I." She looked at him, tears glinting in the sunlight. "Do you think people like us ever really heal?" He smiled. "Maybe not all at once, but 1 mile at a time we get there." They sat on the hood, the evening sun sinking low, painting the sky in shades of mercy. As they drove home, the headlights carved a soft path through the dusk. Tanner glanced at her, then toward the open road ahead. "Guess we finally made it," he said. Lila nodded, voice barely a whisper. Home. And this time, neither of them had to run anymore. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.